begin now. Welcome and thank you for joining Reuters Events. My name is Alan Demers, and I will serve as your moderator for this panel discussion today. Today's topic is achieve pinpoint claims accuracy for unprecedented claims efficiencies. So when you think about claims efficiency and claim accuracy, you can say sometimes those don't always fit together smoothly. Highly competitive insurance markets are constantly pressuring loss adjustment expense, in which some reductions can actually dilute claim accuracy. This is true, especially in emerging innovation and technology is advancing, and the time it may take before scaling and perfection can begin to see ROI uplift. When a claim is submitted, having the right information can be the difference between a major loss and a minor loss, or a happy customer or a soon-to-be former customer. Our panel of experts are going to talk about how carriers can build a 360-degree view of every claim by strategically combining data, technology, and people to maximize accuracy and manage losses. So it is my pleasure to introduce our panel today. Lance Andre is the EVP and Chief Claims Officer of Germania Insurance. Welcome, Lance. Scott St. John is Chief Claims Officer at UPC Insurance. Welcome, Scott. And finally, we have Patrick Quigley. He's the EVP, Executive Vice President and GM of Insurance at Nearmap. So we're glad to have you all join. In a moment here, I'll have each one introduce themselves and spend a little bit of time sharing their point of view. And then we'll get into some Q&A. Certainly for our audience, you have the opportunity to ask questions along the conversation. We'll try to get to all of those, so feel free to click in the chat section and go ahead and ask those questions. So a little bit about my background, and we'll get to the others. I come from an insurance background. I spent 30 plus years in claims, and the last 15 in several different executive leadership roles. While at Nationwide Insurance, my last role was to start up claims innovation. And now I lead InsurTech Consulting, and we're focused on modernizing insurance. So that's a little bit about me. So let's go right over to Lance first and introduce yourself and your opening remarks, please.
Yeah, hello, everyone. I am Lance Andre. As mentioned earlier, I work for Germania Insurance in Texas. Been in the insurance industry now for, time flies, 26 years. And prior to Germania, I also worked at Liberty Mutual and Farmers in a variety of roles, primarily all in claims and the personal line side.
Welcome, Lance. Well, we'll finish the introductions, then we'll come right back to you. How's that sound? So Great. Next up, Patrick, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrick Quigley, and I'm the Executive Vice President and General Manager over the insurance practice at a company called Nearmap. Nearmap is a high-resolution property intelligence company, and we'll go into a little bit more detail. My background is 30 plus years in not only serving the insurance space, but the common thread of my career has been on the technology side, supporting the insurance space, all around the topics of analytics, predictive analytics, AI, in addition to content. So thanks for having me.
Welcome. Glad you're here, Patrick. And then Scott, how about you?
Good morning. Thank you, Alan. My name is Scott St. John. I am the Chief Claims Officer of UPC Insurance, based out of St. Petersburg, Florida. So one reason why I'm wearing a lighter shirt than a sweater compared to some of those guys up north. Been in the industry now for actually just my 31st year, and believe it or not, all in claims. We're one of the few that probably decided to go into claims right off the start and have still been here. Prior to UPC, spent about 14 years at Farmers Insurance, so Lance and I kind of had the same stint there. There I ran the CAT team for a couple of years, portion of the CAT team, and then also 27 states in the eastern part of the country. So plenty of years in claims, from paper files to the newest technology of today. So look forward to talking about it.
So great. So we have an all-star panel, and it's my pleasure to be speaking with you today. So let's get right into it. Lance, why don't we begin with you and just give your perspective on what you see happening out in the marketplace, what you think of how you strive for both accuracy and efficiency at the same time, and what that means to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll kick us off. I think we're all going to bring a little bit of a different perspective at the table, to the table. I'm going to talk about a couple of newer emerging technologies while also revisiting some thoughts. So first off, when thinking about data in general, there's so much available through third-party integrations into the core system. And what's really become clear is the data is readily available. And the key is to be able to get that data on an automated basis. So why is that important? Well, the alternative is to have your claims handlers collect all of the data. And with that in mind, that takes time and it takes effort, which is a bit of a production drain. And so the thought is integrating with various data solutions is the ability to gain data through pre-fill, and in some cases, even collect more data than maybe what the standard has been previously when you have an individual collecting that data. Plus, it's consistent. Same process is followed every time from a governance standpoint. Therefore, the consistency seems to be a little bit better. With that in mind, another data flow opportunity is through speech analytics, which has really taken off and has become so much more intelligent and flexible these days in regard to being able to read voice inflections and analyze that to perhaps determine when there is a customer at risk from a customer experience standpoint, which allows automated messages to go through to supervisors to alert them, hey, there might be something going on with this claim and the customer is at risk, allows the supervisor to intercede and hopefully get that back on track. Likewise, being able to mine and collect that free-form data that may be in our file notes and things of that nature can point us in a direction of particular claims that could be at risk, even missed subrogation opportunities and things of that nature. So I just wanted to revisit that topic as well as triage. Triage is really the backbone, I think, of the claims operation, and that is getting the right claim to the right people through the right channel. So basically, effective triage opportunities drive customer experience, it drives efficiency, and obviously it impacts the loss ratio, especially when you're attempting to utilize some of your repair programs and things of that nature. Similar to what we were speaking to a little bit earlier about getting the same data every time. If you have an automated triage process in place, it's consistency. If your roles are set up appropriately and your models are set up appropriately, there's less chance that claims end up getting misrouted, which then leads to that reassignment process and things that obviously impact customer service. Also, one of the things that's becoming a little bit more prevalent in the industry, and a lot of carriers are off to the races to get there, is straight through processing. And so in order for straight through processing to work effectively, obviously your triage process has to be solid. And with that in mind, you're focusing on those non-complex claims that are very similar and predictable in nature. To enable that straight through process. And hey, let's throw one more technology in there, and that would be telematics. Coupling your triage process with telematics, you can really get to that true touchless processing should you as a carrier think that's important and it's a good fit for your customers. And briefly, I'll touch on talent as well. So I still look at the employee base as the biggest and most important asset to a particular company wishing to gain a competitive advantage. And so the question becomes, how might you best utilize your staff? And that's where it gets back to automating a lot of these admin tasks and data collection, picking off all of those very common steps that occur on every claim that take time if you're utilizing your staff to execute those tasks. And the key is, in my opinion, is to be able to utilize your staff to focus more on building that connection with the customer. And then secondly, utilizing them for the more complex tasks that really generate a better claim outcome as it applies to things such as proper and thorough investigations. So if obviously there are some tasks that are complex and are not a good fit for automation, so that's where we want to plug our staff in and use them. And it's important for us to free up their time so that we're utilizing their expertise to do those types of things.
It helps when you unmute yourself. I appreciate all that, Lance. The one part that really resonates is having a solid triage. And I think one thing that's true about claims, if the claim starts off on good footing, it usually ends on a high note. And alternatively, if you get out of the gates and just don't have a good way of supporting the customer, you end up playing recovery throughout the whole process. So really good to hear all those. We're going to come back to you with lots of great questions. But next up, we have Patrick. I know Patrick's going to share a couple slides and talk a little bit here about how he sees things from the vendor side of the fence.
Yeah, so Lance, thanks for starting us off. A lot of relevant points you brought up. Hopefully I can relate those into the way that Nearmap is servicing not only the carrier space, but a lot of the innovative insurtechs. So as a content or an aerial imagery company, the best thing for me to do is actually tell a story with pictures. So I'm just going to share a couple slides with everyone. And Alan, I'm assuming we can see the slides. But just as way of background, Nearmap is a technology innovation company. We were born in Perth, Australia, which is if you drill a hole through the center of the earth from my house in Cincinnati, you'd probably come away about 100 miles off the coast of Perth. Perth is the most remote capital city in Australia. So what's unique about Nearmap is that technology and innovation, we capture very high resolution aerial imagery. And what we're doing is we're continuously monitoring close to 110 million residential and commercial properties across North America. All that imagery is consistent. Lance mentioned consistency as being a critical factor through that whole process. Everything we do at Nearmap is consistent. The resolution, the AI that we derive, consistency absolutely is part of the game. We also have a comprehensive stack in terms of, it's not one type of content that solves a problem, it's actually the merging of those together that drives rich analysis. So let's take a look at the policy lifecycle. Obviously, we're focused today on the claim side of things, but this technology is really relevant across the policy lifecycle. It all starts with that visual representation of that property. I like to say this property in Scottsdale, Arizona is where I wish to someday retire. It's a nice example because it has a lot going on. So in terms of just familiarizing yourself with this type of technology, first and foremost, that visual analytics is very important, especially in terms of having that pre-look before a claim was put in or a catastrophe came through. Obviously, one of the things you can do is click on that property and get some information, the address, the lat long, the exact date that picture was taken, which is really relevant. One of the unique things about Nearmap is we have been collecting aerial imagery in the US since 2014. On average, we have 14 to 15 shots of every property dating back to 2014. More importantly, in the areas that have the highest density of properties, Chicago as an example, or Atlanta, we capture those areas 3 times a year. So in this case, Scottsdale, Arizona, we have 24 captures of this property going back to 2014. It's a living atlas for you to interact with. You can zoom in on those properties. Obviously, this is a tile roof. You can start investigating the runoff, the condition, the extrusions coming off of that property. You can get in very close. The analysis of this property, especially when you're coming in after a claim or you're researching a claim, having simple tools that allow you to bring measurement to that imagery, not only in a 2D space, but also a 3D space, is very valuable for not only the claim side, but also the underwriting side. If we go back, one of the things that you can't really have a conversation these days in our space is the application of artificial intelligence on this imagery to extract property characteristics out of that visual representation. So let's go back to this visual representation of this vacation home. And now we paint the pixels with intelligence. Now we're overlaying intelligence that is extracted out of that imagery, and that imagery starts to come alive. This imagery, as Lance said, in terms of a pre-fill, is available not only as a database and a visualization layer, but it can be combined in terms of doing that work that allows you to do things on the claims process. I'm going to show you some post-CAD imagery soon, but Lance talked about triaging. Can you leverage a database to help you triage and point your most experienced adjusters to the most complex, tasks, or have a straight through process and communicate with that customer based on information that you're gleaning automatically from this information? So one of the things as an industry, we are here to help get our customers back on their feet fast. A lot of people say, wow, isn't this kind of spooky technology? Well, no, this is information that allows us to service our customers in new ways. So Nearmap flies a very extensive PostCap program. We're actively monitoring all live events. We thought 2020 was a heavy season. We flew over 24 events. This past year, and we're not done, I'm going to knock on wood, hopefully we're done, but with it being now December, officially hurricane season is over, knock on wood. But one of the things, we've flown 27 events this year. Of course, the one that's on everybody's mind is Hurricane Ida. That had landfall on the 29th. It was a Category 4 hurricane with 150-mile-an-hour sustained winds. It was just a couple mile an hour off of being a Category 5 when it hit land. Now, this data was provided in August 2021 by Aon as part of a global catastrophe recap. At the time, it was the second most intense storm to make landfall in the state of Louisiana. And at that time, is the sixth costliest. I think those numbers have actually gone to the worst since then. But with pre-imagery that I was showing you before, here's imagery that was captured on October 17th. Since we're regularly flying these areas, we have that database that you can go in and look at the condition of the home before Ida came on shore. Well, this is imagery that was collected the day after that storm cleared the area, and you can now see the devastation of this property. Now, this is probably a total loss. So in terms of land straight through processing, hey, let's get the person set up in a hotel room. Let's let them know the condition of the house, because in a lot of times they can't even get back into the area based on when this imagery was brought in. Here's another area, and now you can see not everything is total loss. In this case, all the black dots all over the place are all the shingles that have come off the roofs. You also see the property with a lot of white. It looks like pickup sticks, but that's the fence. So it's not only about the property itself, it's about the surrounding properties and what's on that property in terms of what you have to go investigate. Here's another example in terms of not only damage to the roofs, but damage to the different structures on that property. In the lower right, you see a blue roof. That's a metal roof. Now that did pretty good in this particular storm. It's not only about severe wind events, so hurricanes, tornadoes, derechos. it's all also about the wildfires. And again, our industry saw very intense wildfires. The Dixie wildfire in this example is actually the largest wildfire to burn through California. And wildfire is now becoming more and more of a constant dialogue every year that we're having. It starts earlier, it lasts longer. And in this case, this was wildfire pre-coverage for the Dixie fire in this area on August 1st, 2021. If I apply those AI layers, now you can start seeing the building footprints and the vegetation encroachment and the fuel load in terms of the trees over painting on top of this imagery. This is on the 10th, which is the day after this wildfire came through this particularly heavily populated area. So you can see that a wildfire will act very differently depending on the wind conditions. But now we come in and look, there's a series of properties here that are total losses, burned to the ground, but there's also some properties that were spared. Now, one of the things that is happening within our industry is with this type of technology, now we can start having a different dialogue with our customers. We used to really be about repair, replace. We're looking now to help our carrier partners. How can we get proactive? How can we look at those fuel loads? So when you bring this all together, looking at a neighborhood, one of the things you can do is not only see that high resolution aerial imagery and understand what's going on the property, but when you bring these AI layers and the intelligence together, I can start looking at the composition of the roof. What is all the vegetation around that roof structure in terms of fuel loads? And how can I start working with the customer to reduce the fire risk around their property by trimming back those trees, by removing the debris? So in this case, if I put a perimeter around that house at 10, 20, and 30 meters out from the house, I can now start looking at different vegetation loads so that we can participate with our insured in terms of looking at how to mitigate the risk on that property. So now you can see the combination of 2D imagery, 3D imagery, along with AI, all coming together to aid in some of those use cases that Lance mentioned. So hopefully through a few visual examples, it kind of gets the creative juices going here on the panel.
That's some really interesting things you just showed us, and I know we're going to have a lot of questions and commentary about that. So along the lines of questions to the audience, if you do have them, feel free to put them in the Q&A chat session. We'll get to those throughout the presentation, so fill them up. And then Scott, you've been real patient there, so now going to turn things over to you and really like to hear your perspective on all of this.
Okay, thank you, Alan. So I'm probably going to not say anything probably new that either Lance or Patrick already talked about. Really, maybe give some of my experiences of kind of how we use a lot of that data that's out there and available. I think Lance you hit it right on the head with saying triage. That really is, no matter if it's a cat loss or a non-cat, whatever kind of claim it is, that entire triage process really is extremely valuable. And having as much information early on in the process really streamlines the entire claim. I mean, it really helps I think back in the day when I was handling claims, you go to insured's home, you really never knew what you were walking up to until you got there. Now you can tell, is it 2-story, 3-story? Can I access the roof? Can I not get to the roof? What's in the backyard? Really, what's all available to you? And having that information, right at the start of the claim, either from what you collected on the underwriting side, what you pulled in from prior loss histories, or whatever's out there, is extremely valuable. And then taking that, in working with the customer, during that initial process, it really helps you identify, where those claims should go. And really getting them to I think one thing we all know is, the right adjuster, the first time, will save you a lot of headache and heartache you're going forward. So getting it to that right person, as quickly as possible, and and who can resolve it, as quickly as possible as well. That's a big part of it. When I think back about, I know Patrick mentioned, Hurricane Ida, is one of the things that's very valuable with this, the sort of data that he provided, that he showed was, within 24 to 48 hours after the event, you have images, and what that allows you to do is, most times the insureds haven't been back to their homes yet. If your policies are uploaded up front into the system, it'll flag back to you, hey, here's the ones that are in the path, working on getting more damage recognition up front from here's what changes have occurred over time. But really what really lets you do is, if the house if it's a grounder, if it's a obvious total loss, you know what, I don't need a large loss specialist on that claim. I can get that claim paid within 24 hours, get the insured money in their hands, get them moving forward. The faster I can pay them, the faster we're going to move towards resolution and keep public adjusters and attorneys and everything else, away from as much as possible. And that really is important. And the same thing with regards to even like, major hailstorms or wind events. You look at images and you see the roof is clearly damaged, and if there's minimal or no interior water damages, you can desk adjust that claim all day long and not send somebody out there. You send your more experienced ones and the ones that have a lot of tenure in larger claims like that, going out to the areas that were maybe weren't hit as hard. That you really have to work with the contractors and insured representatives on those kind of claims. That's kind of data that really, when you look at it in the initial handling of the claim, really becomes valuable. But not only the imagery, but you also have text messaging that you can record all that information. You can see. I know Lance mentioned the voice inflection. That's a huge driver towards fraud. When somebody depending on how they speak in normal tones, if they start going maybe a little off center, and it'll pick up on that. It'll tell you, hey, this is something to look into. But doing the same thing with all the customers, looking at data that tells you if the insured had a theft loss in an area, how many theft losses occurred in that zip code in the last 30 days or 60 days? Is it out of the ordinary? Does it make sense? Based on the coverage they have this insured's home, is what they have in that zip code and that coverage, does it seem appropriate with regards to contents in the house? A lot of that stuff is out there available through different sources that just really improves the process. But then being able to do smaller things from virtual imaging, either with sending them the insured a link, pulling up their camera on their phone. Everybody has almost everybody has smartphones nowadays, and it really helps out that entire process of getting the claim that I look at things that would have taken driving to the insurance home in the past, spend a couple hours there, driving back to the office and writing it up and finishing it. A good adjuster today can do that in a half hour, depending on the kind of claim, and as long as it's not a really questionable coverage area. But definitely the more data you have up front, I know like Lance mentioned also, it is a little bit of pain to capture that as you go forward with it. But honestly, the adjusters, I think they realize once you collect it, you get used to collecting it, between the initial handling of the claim, subrogation, salvages, whatever's involved in a loss, really does speed up the process as you go down the path of resolving the claim itself. It really just makes everything easier for us.
It all makes a lot of sense. Claim process is a bit of being a detective, especially in the early stages of a claim. You're seeing information, gathering it, trying to sort through it all, and having that data and information before you even did a physical inspection, for example, would be a really big benefit, because you know what you're going to see before you even get there. Or to your point, Scott, maybe don't even need to physically see it. So we're getting some really great questions here. I want to switch over to those and have some more dialogue. But Lance, we'll start with you. What do you think is one of the biggest benefits of predictive models and artificial intelligence?
Well, obviously the efficiency gain is great, because the models have gotten so good that they can accurately determine, help make decisions in a split second, as opposed to perhaps what took minutes prior to by an actual adjuster. So it's nice for some of those very repetitive task or quote unquote decisions to be presented to the adjuster as they receive the claim, instead of it becoming a task for them to complete. And then the other piece of it is the consistency aspect. So my organization has a lot of long-term employees who are beginning to retire. So we've all heard for, the last 5, 6, 7 years that we're losing some of our most experienced adjusters across the country, and for that matter, globally. And the real thing or tough challenge to overcome is attracting new people to our industry. But even once we receive or get additional people, chances are the tenure level is going to be lower. And with that lost knowledge, the AI tools are helping close that gap. That way, there's a lot of consistency being driven by AI, which I think takes some of the human error factor out of it. Obviously, you may have a particular adjuster that's been on board for a while and is very competent in decision making, as opposed to someone who may have only been in the role for 3 months. So as they're going through the learning curve, how many things slip between the cracks? And that's where AI can come in, whether it's helping make a triage decision, helping determine where to channel a claim as it applies to desk handled, direct repair, those type of things. It really just gives a heads up and hopefully minimizes the number of times those type of things can fall between the cracks.
Yeah, some really good points there, especially the knowledge transfer. I think we continually have to prepare for that in our industry, and being able to share information that is more consistent from claim to claim, adjuster to adjuster. Those are 2 really good reasons. Patrick, I've got one here. It's probably more of a comment, but question. It's asking about false claims, and if, in this case, if a visit to the property may be avoided if, kind of a post cat situation or storm situation that's showing the structure intact. Just wanted to get your thoughts on, early fraud detection and how that may work.
Yeah, it's a great question, and absolutely one of the use cases that is leveraged, not only in terms of a post-cat, but there's still a lot of claims that are put in, not related to a major event, that having that living atlas go back in time and having evidence that is objective to support that conversation has been invaluable. And I know that Scott can probably give you some real world examples, but absolutely being able to step back through all of that change over time so you can pinpoint, okay, here's the time of the claim, here's the imagery and the AI as close to that claim as possible. Let's have a informed dialogue, which sometimes ends the conversation pretty quickly in terms of backtracking. But no, it is an invaluable tool because it brings the objectivity. And as Lance said, as we're training, as we're recruiting, as we're trying to bring new people into the industry, traditionally our industry has had a stigmatism of really being kind of slow to move and not a big adopter of technology, which from my seat, I see completely the opposite. So by leveraging these technologies, we'll be able to bring people on, get them trained, but also potentially have a higher impact because it's bringing that objectivity and it has evidence. And again, because we've flown since 2014, in Florida, where you have 3 years to put in a claim, you weren't thinking about it 2 years ago before somebody called you last week, but now you can go back and investigate that property.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So Scott, maybe get your point of view on this one too, kind of good segue. Are you comfortable with making coverage decisions, i.e. denials, without physically inspecting damages or physically inspecting the property?
Yeah, for the most part, Alan, I would say no, just because of the fact that you really want to put boots on that roof or somebody looking at it if you are going to deny it. Now, what I will say, kind of going back to the previous question, there are plenty of cases where a denial can be issued based on the information you can find. And so what I mean by that is one of the things that we see frequently, especially in the state of Florida and quite a bit in Texas in certain areas with all the events we've had, is a policy may cancel in, let's just say, June. Okay, they'll turn that loss in December for an April storm loss. Okay, or maybe it was a storm from last year, but we know that policy is canceled. So now they have a late report that breaches our ability to properly investigate did the loss occur during the time period the policy was in force, which is prejudice our rights. So in the case like that, if you have images that were pre-cancellation and post-cancellation, which a lot of times you will, especially after 90 or 120 days after supposed date of loss, and the condition hasn't changed, you can use that for a denial, or at least supporting of a denial. Because we've had plenty of those where they've purchased the policy, but you find that the damage actually occurred previous to the policy coming in force. Because a lot of the roof inspectors may not go out, or if you're inspecting a property, it may be on the back of the home, they just do a drive-by, you only see the front of the house, but you have clear evidence of that damage being there, or that prior repair or something being there either before or after a policy was either purchased or canceled. And that is a big piece of what we use it for right now.
Yeah, and one follow-up question, how's the customer experience? What do customers say when they're presented with information? And hopefully in most cases you're supporting a claim. I know we talk about denials, but just seeing firsthand or hearing how you're adjusting or inspecting their claim, what are they saying?
Well, obviously if we give them information that shows they're not telling us the complete truth, that obviously has a certain tone of conversation. But the more information we have, the easier it is for us to handle that claim, regardless of the outcome. If you have clear evidence on that side, but once you notify the insured of that, and a lot of the public adjusters or attorneys are out there are aware that you have that technology available to you, they're not even going to pursue those claims. If they know that's there. I mean, we had one, and I don't like to give always stories, but we had one where it was inspected. They did flyover 6 months ago, did the flyover 3 weeks ago. 2 days over after the second flyover, they turned a claim in for damage that occurred, on that date. And granted, the policy had canceled within a couple of days of that as well. We had the image taken on a Monday. Damages they reported as occurring on the Sunday before the loss, before they turned it into us, and we had the image of it showing no damage. We inspected it 4 days later. They tore off a square of the roofing material on their own to try to turn the claim in, even though we had the images before their claim date of loss. That was no damages. So again, few and far between, but it's so valuable to the fraud side of it.
Great, thank you for that. Lance, I know you talked earlier about how knowledge transfer is an important part of using intelligence and data and different ways of handling claims. But what job roles do you continue to see changing as technology and the use of data improve? And what does this mean for employees in the long run, i.e. claim adjusters? We hear that all the time. What's the impact of what's the future of the adjuster in all of this?
Yeah, I think, there's no secret formula behind it. I think part of it depends upon who you are as a carrier, and what's your value proposition. How are you positioned in the marketplace? So, for example, a carrier that's not competing primarily on price, but service level, there's always going to be a place for the human factor, right? And so really, it's all about understanding and helping the workforce understand that over time, it's inevitable. The job is going to change. As new technology is introduced, certain tasks won't need to be performed, or they'll need to be performed differently. And so really, I think it's the mindset of an organization to develop a philosophy of either upskilling or reskilling folks. So I look at it more with my company, and where our value proposition isn't necessarily utilizing and leveraging technology to eliminate staff. Hopefully we continue to grow. So there's going to be that ongoing need as we grow to have the nominal staffing level to get the work done. So really it becomes a mindset of the organization to adopt a different type of model as it applies to training. A lot of our training is very traditional and technical based, and we train people for a particular role, but we don't necessarily look at what's coming down the road, how that's going to impact our employee base, and then how we may need to be more proactive in training new skills that that particular group doesn't have to get ready for the technology. And you have to create that awareness. And one of the models that's out there is called dynamic workforce management. And it's really doing just that. It's taking a more proactive approach towards learning and development to ensure that your staff is ready when that new technology comes and the job role changes.
Yeah. So in a lot of ways, the role is expanding and certainly not being diminished. The repetitive work, I think we would all agree, the efficiency gain, the things that customers can do themselves all make sense. But trying to keep track of all the different tools and be proficient at them and leverage them in the right ways, that takes certain skills beyond what we've probably done in the past. Patrick, I want to go to you next. I know you made some comments about prevention, and I think one of the trends in the industry today is that the insurance industry is trying to get to be a more proactive rather than a reactive model. We talk a lot more about prevention and early detection and those kinds of things, and those are exciting possibilities. So talk to us a little bit about that, if you will.
Yeah, so I gave an example of some of the work that we're doing around wildfire risk mitigation with our customer base. And if you watch the television, you can't go without a commercial break without seeing, a carrier talking about, bringing us on as one of their insured. And one of the things that has taken place over the past few years is, there's some of our customers that are willing to exchange data and insight in terms of a premium reduction. For instance, in the automotive industry, if you plug in a device that monitors your speed and braking, you can, because we can identify the risk profile, i.e. you're a safe driver, I'm going to give you a premium break. Or from the property space, there really hasn't been kind of a mindset in terms of doing that, because you may give a break on a premium, i.e. now there's legislation in California, if the insured is doing their part in terms of reducing the risk by removing debris and trimming back the trees, et cetera, you too also can be rewarded with a premium break. But how do you monitor that? You have the device in the car that's sending constant data, but how do you monitor that? Well, the space is evolving whereby this imagery is now collected on a more regular basis. As I mentioned, we in California regularly monitor 94% of all properties across the state of California. A lot of those properties are flown over 3 times a year. So now there's a mechanism to be moving into this proactive, preventative, but more importantly, how are you reporting on that? And how are you having a dialogue in exchange to say, hey, you may have forgot to trim back your trees. Can you, bring somebody out to do that? So I really think there's an opportunity for us as an industry, as we start leveraging these cloud capabilities that bring not only visual inspection, but also detection of what's going on that property, and more importantly, not only on the property, but in a Santa Ana wind with a wildfire that's a mile away, that spark may travel still to your property. So what are we doing in terms of monitoring this risk and changing the dialogue? This could offer the opportunity to really change the conversation and build that trust in terms of proactive communication that could take place, knowing it's in the best interest of the customer. So I think it's a really fascinating area. I think you can also, apply that to some of the things that are going on with flood. Obviously, AI can identify vegetation, but AI can also determine new construction areas. hey, what are the surfaces in terms of pervious and impervious surface? The digital elevation model. So we have a 3D model that shows you the contours of the earth. When you bring the predictive nature of AI along with 3D, where would the water flow? We can start looking at, as the levels of our oceans rise because of climate change, storm surge on the back end of a hurricane, or more importantly, flash floods because of the intensity of some of the rainfall storms that have taken place over the last year. We can restart looking at, the dynamics of risk to take a different approach. So hopefully that answers your question, Al.
Now, some great thoughts there. And Scott, I wanted to ask you this, since we spent a lot of our attention on property claims, there's also liability claims. So just curious if you have any situations where you've used technology to assist with liability investigations, and if yes, what has been helpful in defending such claims?
Yeah, thanks, Al. Yeah, so we do use it for our liability investigations, because the majority, well, honestly, every claim we get now is always going to be reported, months, sometimes years after the actual event occurred. So some of it you can get online. You can either use a near map technology or even just go to Street View and Google to look at like the slip and fall areas, so like sidewalks or driveways. So you can get, what the condition may have been over the last couple of years. If it's a sidewalk or something that's raised or along those lines. But then if you have an interior type situation, you can always just send an insured a link, have them pull up their smartphone, and you can get your images pretty quick. Because you can just tell them to aim the camera here. Let me take a picture real fast. Maybe do some quick online measurements, and I'll have everything you need to have on it. Because a lot of it, so it's very rare that you'll get a liability claim on the homeowners or commercial side it's actually a live event. It just doesn't happen. It's usually months later, and you can just get as much as you can. And a lot of it gives you good information, especially if it's if it's a sidewalk that's been in maybe a raised condition for the last 3 or 4 years. Well, it doesn't always eliminate liability, but it's something that's been there for a long period of time. You can tell if it's open and obvious, or if it's hidden by anything else, or any shadows or anything. And same thing with slip and falls with watermarks and anything like that with regards to natural accumulation with ice and what was man-made. So it does help out for us.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And to our audience, keep the questions coming. This is a really helpful conversation, and appreciate all the questions you're asking, but there's room for more. Lance, we were talking earlier, and claims organizations are doing a lot to balance all the methods of inspection, managed repair options, virtual claim handling, desk claim handling. There's a lot of moving parts. And so now when you kind of layer in or add in the idea of geospatial and other artificial intelligence data, where does that fit in? And does it replace some of those options or make them better? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a challenge because some of the technology is very interesting and it develops so quickly. It's hard not to, chase around the shiny objects, right? So how do you sift through all of that? And I think that's where a very disciplined approach needs to come into play. Sitting down at a table, brainstorming with the team to include frontline employees, putting a team together to evaluate the various technologies that you're looking to potentially integrate. And it's really looking at each one of those to determine which ones are going to give you the most lift. In other words, what percentage of the claims will it apply to? That's a great question. If the number of claims that the technology will influence is a high portion, then your return on investment is going to come a lot quicker. Also, where are your pain points in the operation, not only for the customer, but also for your employees. So one of the things I know we've done at our organization is we have continuous improvement in place, and that philosophy. So that's really taking a look from the inside out. What we're trying to do now is be more flexible and looking at the outside in from the customer's perspective as it applies to customer journey mapping. Because at the end of the day, if we're employing technology that we think is going to help, and it's in technology that we feel the customers will want, and we don't check with them, then guess what? We may end up missing out, spend a lot of time and effort on something that could give you minimal lift. So it's really being disciplined and choosing those things that are going to touch a high percentage of the claims to help build that return on investment faster. And at the end of the day, it may not be the most shiny object that's out there, but if it helps you move the needle quicker, then you have to take that disciplined approach and stick with it.
Yeah, definitely have to be practical about things as we continue to adopt more and more technology. One more quick one here, and then what I want to do after this last question, or after this next question, I should say, is get each of you to kind of look forward and do your best to predict what you see coming around the corner. Maybe look at that in two ways. One, what you're going to see for 2022, and then what you see ahead with the emergence of AI and imagery and high resolution imagery and so forth. But Scott, I've got a quick one here for you. How do you think artificial intelligence tools can help mitigate the social inflation phenomena that we're seeing in the rising litigation costs?
Well, I think a lot of it is with the, with the technology you have available, they'll show you if something's been previously damaged or not damaged at all. A lot of the, hey, all my neighbors got new roofs, I want a new roof type situations. Those kind of go away when you have information support one way or the other. When you have that type of information, but then just the the other data that's available when you start looking at building permits that have been pulled around the neighborhood. If you start seeing 3 neighbors got new kitchens, and then all of a sudden the 4th one pops up, you start wondering how that's occurring. There's a lot of things out there that once somebody gets something new, everybody else wants to kind of do the same stuff. But having this available to you, it may take it takes you time to dig for it, but you can find it. I mean, even it could be as simple as pulling into a gated community and asking for the records for the last 2 weeks if everybody showed up to your insurance home. Come to find out that contractors, roofers, public adjusters will have been there 3 or 4 days before a loss actually occurs. That doesn't make any sense timeline wise. So all that information available to us is really going to help knock down social inflation going forward on me wanting the shiny thing too.
Thank you. So Patrick, we'll start with you. And again, this is kind of your look forward. And again, with the availability of high resolution imagery, artificial intelligence, we're just seeing technology and innovation at speeds we haven't seen in the last decades. So it's an exciting time, but there's still more to conquer. So what do you see ahead in 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, so some of the innovation we're working on in conjunction with our partners is to continue to explore new and innovative ways that AI can be leveraged. And again, it all gets back to that customer experience. How can we help that customer get back on their feet faster? So for instance, the imagery that I showed, we can collect that imagery, we can get it online, we can have it accessible either visually on a mobile phone for the adjuster who's in the field, or it can be, automated through APIs. And again, Lance touched on the importance of getting the technology up and running fast. So I would say having enterprise grade APIs with the vendors that you work for or work with is very important. But speeding up how fast you can get access to that imagery, but then helping in the triage. So we have extensive AI for the underwriting side in terms of roof condition, et cetera, et cetera. We've also applied that technology to post-cat situations where now we have damage detection. We are working on bringing this into production because it has to meet the rigorous SLA standards that we set with our carrier customers in terms of the delivery of the imagery. But we're doing the same thing. So training those models to find the missing shingles, the exposed plywood, worst case, where's the exposed rafters, where water can come in and do further damage. In addition, where all the trees that were in one place and now we're in a different place. So the worst case being overlaid on top of the roof, because you first need somebody to go and cut the tree away to see the damage underneath. So applying AI and damage detection to allow the process that Lance and Scott talked about is absolutely something that is coming. In addition, we're not standing still in terms of the resolution of our cameras. We tend to be 3 to 5 years ahead of what's out in the space. We introduced some technology that we're bringing to market that will further enhance that lead. Now we start looking at kind of a unicorn that gets chased is, hey, from the belly of an aircraft, can you detect hail damage? Well, sometimes you can't detect hail damage flying a foot off the roof with a drone. So, what we have to do is work with our carrier partners and InsurTech partners to look at when we get even higher resolution aerial imagery, what are the use cases that can be applied to? So it's really just a continued evolution of some of the things that you're already seeing, but again, driving wider adoption, because a lot of people say, hey, this is something that only the big carriers can take advantage of. And I'm here to say it's not. There's a lot of mid-sized, smaller carriers through the technology and the application, because it's really easy to use, that can also see the benefit. So those are some top of mind things I have for you, Alan, in terms of looking out, slightly over the horizon here. And it's very exciting times for our space.
No doubt. And when you're talking about the resolution, I was thinking back to Google Earth, which was not all that old. And we all looked at that and probably looked at our own property and said, boy, that's amazing what I can see. And then I see the images of what you shared today and how much better that already is. And to think it's going to get even exponentially better is really exciting. So thanks for your outlook on the future. Lance, what do you think's around the corner and into the future from your point of view?
I think around the corner, the one thing that COVID is done, I guess, globally, is really enhance the reliance on digital capabilities that are out there and other technologies. So, and it's uniform across all industries. It's not just insurance. So I think that's helped the insurance industry out. With that in mind, more people are working remote, more people are using these type of tools, and they're less suspect. And let's face it, people are still suspect of insurance companies, especially during the claims process. So I think, continued adoption is likely to come easier for our customers to choose these options that we're talking about, with more virtual handling and things of that nature. Also, we're trying to focus a little bit more too in involving non-program vendors in utilizing technology. The crafty adjusters and most efficient adjusters are utilizing them for inspections. So when it comes to a contractor at a home that's phoning in for a supplement, instead of looking at it from the perspective of either I have to wait on photos or I need to go out and take a look at that on site, it's, hey, let me send you a link and let's do a video inspection of this together. So most vendors are willing to do that. It helps everyone. It helps them get the approval faster, so the repairs get done and the customer benefits from it in the long term. I think down the road, it's definitely what Patrick is saying. It's basically looking at the technology, especially around AI and predictive modeling, that's the most effective, and then adopting that technology in other areas of the business. For example, it's quite amazing what the fraud solutions can do these days. And so now I see vendors sort of shifting gears and applying some of that same methodology and building models with various scenarios now to identify subrogation opportunities. And subrogation is definitely an area that I think can really benefit from more technology. Certainly can help the bottom line, that's for sure. So just top of mind, those are definitely a couple of things. I think the industry is adjusted and come to terms with the fact that maybe you're giving up a little bit on loss controls side to do things virtually. But if you have the right mix of tools through the efficiency gain and the lower expense cost, it's a wash, and you have a happier customer at the end of the day because the claim gets handled faster.
Thank you, Lance. And Scott, I've left yours down to one word because we're coming up on about 15 seconds. In a word, what's around the corner?
Oh, I'll tell you, speed and efficiency. I guess I look at it quickly as people, process, technology. You have the people, the process, technology is all going to change. Then the final thing is the life cycle of a claim doesn't end when we pay it. It now ends when the repairs are done. And I think as you go forward, the insurer is going to require more of that end of it versus the just getting it paid. So,
well, sorry for cutting you short. I want to thank the panel. We'll end on that really high note of speed and efficiency. It's been tremendous conversation, gentlemen. I appreciate your time, and to our audience for attending Reuters events. Thank you, and have a rest of your week. Have a really good week ahead.
Thank you.